This is a model of Tarkon. Okay, well, we've had a few questions and feedback on our recent videos with peel ply, epoxy, fiberglass, all this sort of stuff, and how we're glassing up Tarkon, what is peel ply, what is epoxy, what is fiberglass, why are we doing this? We're hoping to just quickly answer a few of those questions now with a little demonstration model. So we have crafted this up very quickly. This is a model of Tarkon from Myrtle. Tim's going to be very upset that we haven't finished it. Sorry, Tim. He's one of our patrons that sort of gave us some advice on how to make a model. Anyway, we've made another one. This one's actually backwards. It's around the wrong way, which is a common mistake, I guess, when you're building a boat. I'm glad we didn't do it on the big one, though. So what we're going to do is essentially epoxy saturate, or with neat epoxy, peel ply, and fiberglass this hull to show you how we're doing it in real life. Tarkon's hull is 2 layers currently of wood. First layer is 4.5, so it runs forwards and backwards along the hull. That's called the strip planking. The second layer is the diagonal veneers, which you can see behind me. The veneers are about 6 mil thick and 70 mil wide roughly, and the strip planking beneath is 30 mil by 26 mil, I believe. We've also fiberglassed the inside of the hull already with 450 gram double bias fiberglass. That was some moons ago, as they say. And there's laminated frames also in the hull, so she's very stiff and strong. It's a laminated keel and backbone as well, so we rely heavily on epoxy. In epoxy we trust. So the first thing we've been working on or doing is fairing the hull. This is fairing the diagonal veneers back to bare wood essentially. This is the substrate we want to then coat in epoxy. When we were laying the diagonal planks a year ago or so, as we went, we filled and coated all the planks in epoxy. Now, it's a bit of a pain because we have to sand it off, but what was more important was the planking was covered with epoxy so it wouldn't move. Tas oak moves quite a bit, and we needed to be sure that while we went back on deck and working elsewhere in the boat for the next few months, that the wood was stable and it wouldn't shrink and expand and crack the glue joints. So to stop that, you coat with epoxy after you've done the diagonal veneers. The veneers were pinned on with plastic nails and thickened epoxy. So that creates a lamination between the 4.5 strip planking and the diagonal. After the veneers, we've been working on fairing. As you may have noticed in the past videos, fairing is a long and arduous task. We're not particularly fairing, if you get what I mean. We're not making a perfectly smooth hull yet. We're fairing with a belt sander. People have suggested like flappy discs on big grinders and stuff like that, but we prefer the belt sander because it's flat and it really does actually do a great job. Currently, the more we fair with the belt sander, or the better we fair it now, the less we have to fair later on. So it's important to get any irregularities out of the planking now with the belt sander, remove the epoxy, and remove any plastic nail residue or anything like that, so that it's a good substrate for us to then coat in neat epoxy. The reason behind coating in epoxy first is, well, it's advised upon. It creates a good substrate for the fiberglass to adhere to. It also stops the wood breathing and moving when you're laying the fiberglass. So now we're entering summer, as we've explained earlier, it can off-gas and create air bubbles. So if we just applied neat epoxy onto the bare wood now, what would happen is that we would get little air bubbles coming out into the fiberglass, and that's bad. That's a no-no. So to avoid that, we've been coating the whole hull in epoxy. We've also been filling all the nail holes left over. That seems like a lot, but you get it done pretty quickly. Another reason for coating the boat in epoxy is to stop wicking. I like the word wicking, I think it's cool. But basically wicking is when you apply our neat coat of epoxy to the bare wood and then you lay fiberglass on top. The wood is so thirsty because it's very dry now, it actually sucks the epoxy out of the fiberglass, and then the fiberglass is dry and then it's not as strong. So that's just another reason for us to coat it in epoxy before fiberglassing and letting that cure and then going again. It just eliminates all the wicking. The wood has been fed or watered, I should say, well, epoxied, and it won't take the epoxy out of the fiberglass when you're laying fiberglass. When we coat the boat with epoxy, we then lay peel ply over the top. Peel ply is an interesting fabric. It's vaguely new, and what it does is it creates a substrate that is rough. When you remove the peel ply, so this nylon or polyester cloth, when you remove it, the substrate, some believe and some don't, is ready to then straight away coat with whatever you want to do. So you can theoretically lay fiberglass or fairing powder or whatever straight on the top without having to sand. Now we've already sanded the boat once, so the objective of this peel ply is to eliminate more sanding. Our bodies can only do so much, and by putting peel ply on and spending a couple extra dollars, it saves us from having to sand the boat again. And I assure you, we're going to sand this boat a few times before we're done. The second thing peel ply does is it stops the blush, the amine blush coming through in the colder temperatures of epoxy. This is a waxy residue left over when you lay epoxy on, and you have to, if you have blush, or generally when you have blush, you have to wash it off or clean it. But what peel ply does is that removes the blush. It keeps it on the outside of the peel ply. You pull the peel ply off and the hull is good. There's no waxy residue. So once again, just like not wanting to sand the whole boat again, we don't want to have to scrub and wash the whole boat straight after applying epoxy. So that's the second reason for using peel ply. Once we've removed the peel ply, we are personally sanding the hull very quickly, just to be sure that we get a good adhesion. You may or may not have to after peel ply, but we want to be sure that the fiberglass will stick and never let go. So we give it a quick sand and a clean off. Then we start laying the fiberglass. Our fiberglass that we're using is 450 gram double bias fiberglass cloth. We're doing 2 layers of this. It's very strong, it's quite thick, so it takes a lot of epoxy up, and once again we don't want the wicking, so we really have to put a lot of epoxy into the cloth to make it wet enough. The fiberglass cloth is laid vertically, basically. They're 550 mil wide. So they're just little strips that run up and down the boat. And what we do is we lay a section, so just however long, we lay sections, we butt them against each other like this, and then the final layer goes over the top of that join and butts alongside the other one. So what we're doing is we're laying 2 layers, butting, and then staggering the second layer on top. So there's no joins in the same place. They're staggered, kind of like a scarf or anything like that. You want to stagger your joins. So we do that and we work down the hull. Once we get a section of fiberglass cloth on, 2 layers, we then apply peel ply again. Once again, you guys know the reason for another layer of peel ply. This just stops us having to sand fiberglass, which is even worse than sanding epoxy in my opinion, and creates a good surface for then we're going to lay twill. We'll go into the twill world a bit later. For now, we're just trying to cover the fiberglass and what we're doing there. And at some point, we're going to have to apply fairing compound, and then we're going to break out the torture boards and get really strong and muscled. That's a while off though. So for now, we're just laying the fiberglass cloth and working our way down the hull. Well, I hope that answered most of your questions and queries. Feel free to leave a comment if you're still wondering what we're doing or why we're doing it. And please like and subscribe to our channel if you're enjoying this content and our little journey of building a boat by a river. And thank you. Oh, going over the other way. Okay, I'd like to give a brief explanation of our stanchions and how we are acquiring the shape of these stanchions. Stanchions are quite a daunting task for us. They're a lot of work and they are very susceptible to leaking if not done correctly. So we want to make sure that they never leak. Which on a wooden boat is always hard, but that's why we're using modern methods with our build, such as fiberglass and epoxy. So the stanchions have the pockets routed out that IFCA's done, and they slide in. They have a shape like this, and dunk, go in, and then there's sort of a mark everywhere for the deck line and shear line. And we'll fair that in with a batten later for the capping rail. But to get the shape, let's say 4 years ago when we made our moulds, so our Tarkon was built with moulds and stringers, and we laminated frames to the insides of the stringers, kind of like steaming your ribs to stringers, but in this case we were laminating frames. Those moulds were MDF, and we cut them up and sort of got rid of a lot of them, but I kept certain ones on the top ends of every mould that had the mark of the shear line and top of deck, and they were faired in, so we already have our hull shape that follows the mould. So theoretically you transfer that onto your stanchion and it will slide in and follow the hull nicely. The only issue with that is 3 years in a row my father-in-law has come here and cleaned up, and each year these moulds manage to get onto the rubbish pile and almost disappear, and every year I manage to catch them just in time and bring them back inside and hide them away again for it to happen again the next year. For most people it is just looks like a pile of rubbish, but for me they're very important. I've been having them hidden away for a few years now, waiting for this moment. This is what they look like. They're horrible, they're ugly. This is all glue wiping. As we were planking up, you'd wipe your excess glue somewhere, it would go on the mould. But you can see the shape of the hull. So this actually goes up this way, and I have a mark here for the top of deck and shear line. But as you'll notice, it has a curve. This is the hull shape that I'm transferring onto my stanchions. So it's pretty cool. Yeah, they're horrible bits of rubbish, but very valuable for what we're doing. So now I just literally place this on my stanchion wood that I've prepared and cut it out, and then yeah, fit them, bit of fine tuning to get it fit, and then that's it. Find my shear line, top of deck, split the difference about this long, so sort of that long for that paint. $17. Make sure my taper's going to be enough, which it is just. These are getting real curvy now. Well, it looks pretty fair. Could be a lot worse. So what we're trying to do is fair in the shear with our stanchions. They're a bit ugly right now, but we have to somehow get something fair, which is hard. Not sure how this is going to go, but I'll try. I'll just explain what I'm doing here. We are bedding the stanchions in, a few of them now, so that we can fill the holes and then begin the fiberglassing episode. These stanchions are celery top. They're fastened with bronze screws. We're still keeping with our trend of everything outside is bronze, and below the waterline most importantly. They're bedded in with epoxy filleting powder. Now this is an odd one. Now I know we may have some backlash here on why we're bedding with that. This is a strip planked, rigid, cold moulded boat. Our stanchions are a part of that, and there shouldn't be any movement or room for movement, so epoxy is better for us here. We're going to fillet around the stanchion bases, so create a fillet around and maybe roll fiberglass up. Just because there's fiberglass doesn't mean water's going to get under there and it's going to rot. There's a lot of different ways to build a boat, and this is how we're going to bed our stanchions in. We thought a lot about it, done our research, and this suits this type of build best. So once the glue has cured, well, firstly I'll go down below and make sure the mess is not too bad. I taped up, so I dry fitted and taped, so hopefully I'll be able to just wipe it away, the excess glue, and then that'll be it. And now we can fill the holes on the outside, and these stanchions will sit here now for quite a while before we actually get any planks on it or anything like that. Yeah. But bit of a momentous occasion, which is nice. Finally get something in. They'll be solid once they're all cured, and yeah, quite happy. Okay.